I'm about to read a short story from What Mama Said by Roger Poole, and this one is titled Millie's Barbershop. Matt and Maxine Poole had a family of 2 girls and 5 boys. Food was of greater concern to Matt and Maxine in 1940s Wilton, Arkansas, than was fashion. Even so, when summer's heat and humidity came, the reduction of hairy head cover, while optional for the girls, was a must for the boys. It made sense on many levels. Aside from the cooling effect, it also held promise of making it easier to pass Mama's high regard for hygiene. To wash your hair required little more than combing it with a wash rag if you got a good cut. Any process that might improve the appearance and the smell of a bunch of hot, stinky young boys is bound to find favor with the parents. Mom decided we needed a haircut. She had a plan to get us one for practically free. My oldest brother, Jay, was exempted from this process simply because of his age. We found out later the decision for him to go to a real barber was made because at his age, he was more likely to be embarrassed by the result otherwise. As we finish the remains of our breakfast of apple butter, and biscuits, Mama removed her apron and headed for the back door. She said she would be gone for only a minute or 2. The implied directive was to stay put until she returned. In a few minutes, Mama came through the back door and came straight to the table and began to inspect the heads of my 3 older brothers and me. "What you doing, Mom?" I asked as she continued to examine one scalp after another. "I've arranged for you to get a haircut, and I want to see if any of you needs a dip in Massamore's pond before I send you off," she said. "Send us off where?" asked Richard. The fear in his voice wafted through the air like the smell of a bacon smiley on syrup-laden pancakes. It was sign enough to make my feet begin to burn with an adrenaline-induced fight or flight sensation. Now, I was not at the time familiar with the inner workings of the adrenal glands or related terms like fight or flight. I did know how to be scared. I refer the reader to the Phantom of 47 story. In descending age order, the boys were lined up to suffer through the indignity of Millie's hand-operated hair clipper. Her clippers could easily have been outlawed as a cruel and unusual punishment by the Geneva Convention. Wes and Wayne had already had their turn in Millie's chair. The chair was a straight chair with loosely strung rope bottom. The smaller the child, the deeper in it he was likely to sink down into the chair's bottom. The result effectively holds the victims hostage while the grim hair reaper plies her trade. Millie had just released Wayne and pointed to Richard as next. At this point, Wes, who had just raced up to the hill toward home, sporting his newly scalped noggin, came running back down the hill toward Warren house. He was hollering something about a bike wreck and that the oldest Warren kid, Jocus, was hurt. Millie and husband Monroe went running back up the hill, trying to keep up with the surprisingly fast Wes, who was leading them to the scene. A few minutes earlier, the following scene had unfolded before the arrival of Mr. and Mrs. Warren. Jay had been riding back and forth on the gravel road that runs alongside of the railroad tracks near home. He was proud of his bike, which he had cobbled together from scrapped parts. Jocus watched intently, and as Jay confidently steered around a large rock on the road, Jocus said, "Hey, Jay, let me ride your bike, and I bet I could show you another way to get past that rock." Intrigued, Jay stepped off the bike and said jokingly, "Knock yourself out, Jocus." Jocus happily mounted the bike and pedaled back up the road, about 20 yards from the big rock. He began to pedal as fast as his short legs would allow. He stood up on the pedals to put more power into each downward push. The rock was now on his sights as he came closer and closer to it. One mighty thrust on the downstroke and glory would be his. Just as he got to the rock, he pulled up hard on the handlebars and leaned back hard on the seat. Several things happened all at once, all of which were bad. The chain jumped off the sprocket, Jocus's feet slipped off the pedals, the front wheel came loose and hit the rock and bounced, barely missing Jocus's head. Jocus had intended for the front wheel to rise above the rock. The big grin on Jocus's face vanished quickly when he watched as the front wheel dropped off the bike's front fork and bounced clean over his head. The fork came down to earth, or in this case, down to gravel. The bike came to an immediate stop. The rear end of the bike rose up. Jocus went airborne and landed mostly face first on the gravel road. As Jay had jokingly suggested, Jocus did in fact knocked himself out. As Ma and Pa Warren came on the scene, led by the very hyper Wes, they saw Jocus on the ground and bleeding. Millie screamed out, "Oh no, he's dead!" Jocus moved a bit, and Millie calmed down some, or at least long enough to recognize a need to make a hospital run. As it happened, Daddy was home from the sawmill having lunch. He had the only available mode of transport. Millie ordered Monroe to go get Matt to bring his truck. Monroe took off running towards our house, and he turned to go past it, seemingly headed back to home instead. Millie screamed at him, "Monroe, where you going?" He hollered back, "Got to get my hat." With that, Millie ordered Wes and Leon, Jocus's brother, to go get Matt in the truck. Daddy did come right away, and Jocus, semi-conscious, was loaded in the back of the truck. Millie was up front and Jay was in the back with Jocus. By the time they got him to the hospital in Ashdown, he was coherent again, and after the doctor checked him out and applied a small bandage, they sent him home. When they got home, Millie gave Monroe a proper dressing down for thinking more about covering his bald spot than for their son's safety. If she really wanted to punish Monroe, she could have just given him a haircut. Richard and I were glad she didn't ask us to come back for our turn in the chair. Our turn would undoubtedly come up later, but at least on that date, we got a reprieve.